Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators Football Podcast. And it's a little bit of a special episode. This is episode number 20 of the pod. So we made it through 20 episodes and wanted to give a little shout out. We've actually had over 700 downloads so far. I think that's really cool. Really appreciative of everybody who's taken the time to give us a listen. So if you're listening to this and you have done so, really appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're enjoying it as much as Randy and I have enjoyed bringing this to you. We're really having a great time doing this and just doing it for the enjoyment of it, as I think we've expressed many times. But in case you haven't heard us saying it, we're doing this just out of our want to and our passion for Gator football. And I think that comes through, but in any case, in any chance that it doesn't, just so you know, this is just for us to do for fun and to really try and express our thoughts and opinions and also hopefully some data backed analysis as it relates to Florida football. And any thoughts you want to share on that, Randy?
Nobby, well said. For me, I'll be honest with you, therapy's expensive. So this is good therapy. It just costs, a couple hours. So, I know time is money. No. But all kidding aside, no, man, it's really good to get some of these thoughts out. It's really good to see it from a different perspective, a more analytical perspective, dive into the nuts and bolts, and have really enjoyed it from that perspective. And it's gotten to the point where I've learned things that I didn't realize before. And I'm a data junkie anyway. So soaking up some of this stuff has been really unique and changed some of my perspectives as well.
Yeah, for sure. A couple hours of doing it and several hours of prep, but who's counting, right?
Yeah.
No, it's really good though. I've really had a good time doing it with you so far, and look forward to continue to do it with you as we go forward into the coming season and hopefully beyond. So again, thank you very much for everybody who has listened. We've talked about it a little in the past, but just to bring it up one more time, we do have a Facebook page. It is out there. It's kind of the only way to give feedback, any direct feedback. If you want to, feel free to comment on there. I make posts every so often, every couple of weeks or so. I'll throw a post out there just talking about when we put an episode up. I'll probably put one up this week. Feel free to comment on any of those, and we'll get notified. And we, any feedback or any suggestions for things you want to hear us talk about or dive into or give analysis on, we'd be happy to take a look at it and see if we can't put something together on it. So just so you know, it's out there. So with that, let's dive into episode 20 here. And what we're going to talk about today is a little State of the Union, specifically as it relates to Mr. Billy Napier and his first 2 years and 2 months in office, if you will. This starting back to December 5th, 2021, when he arrived in Gainesville, got off the plane. So to that end, we'll take you through what we want to do tonight with our intro, which as always is going to be our mission, our vision, and our agenda. So our mission, as always, is to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our vision is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and observation of player personnel decisions and on-field execution where possible. So our agenda for tonight is going to be some of the noise that's going on regarding the displeasure and or potential dismissal of Billy Napier as it relates to the 24 Gators team. And to that end, we want to talk about what is working with Billy and what isn't working with Billy as we see it from the kind of purview that we're looking at, and kind of take a look at that again as much as we can from an analytical perspective as we try to do here. We also want to talk about what are the biggest changes that have been brought about in Billy's time here so far, and are those enough, right? Currently and going into next season, and will they continue to be enough if they are for long-term sustainability? And then lastly, if we do have a less than stellar season next fall, right, in 24, can the rebuild that Napier is trying to complete and work on, can it continue to go in the correct direction or in the direction that he and all Gator fans obviously want to see it go in? So that's kind of the agenda that we have. From there, we'll just give you a brief update on what we're going to do in 2 weeks from now, and then do our sign off, of course. So with that, let's go back to the beginning here and have a little discussion around the noise in the system regarding the displeasure or possible dismissal of Billy Napier, and as how does that relate to the 24 Gators. So just a little background for those of you who may not be reading almost every article in the media regarding whether or not Billy Napier is on the hottest hot seat, whether or not he's, should be fired now, shouldn't even get to see the 24 season. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things floating around out there, and it's pretty interesting. But Randy, I'll let you get this started. Um, what are your thoughts surrounding this whole narrative and a lot of the thoughts that are out there in the media on this?
It's tough to hear. It really is tough to hear. Now, a lot of it, and we use the term orange and blue goggles for a reason, right? I think what you read off in our title here of this pod tonight, episode 20, he's been here 2 years, 2 months and some change, right? Getting off the plane on December 5th, 2021. Hasn't been that long. Couple things. What Billy's trying to do is create a unique organization, business organization. And so I look at that the first thing I relate to is a CEO, right? And I go to a source of Forbes, and the thing about a CEO is CEOs use typically the first year of their tenure as transition and something that Forbes called an institutional renewal. You know what? Among a lot of CEOs, 40% of new CEOs are fired or retired within the first 16 to 18 months. And about 65% of them never make it to their fourth anniversary on the job. Fourth anniversary. We talk
That's
about,
that's super interesting stat. I did not know that.
yeah, we can thank Forbes for that. So we fourth anniversary. So we think of terms, right? Term limits, the president of the United States, right? How much time does a CEO, does someone of importance leading an organization need time for a culture, for a philosophy, for systems, for personnel to go in place? That's what's tough to hear, because in an era now where it's just about money and giving a guy a bag and winning and winning, and oh, by the way, and winning, it's just really tough to break through, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Right. So you need a CEO that fits the company. I'll give you an example. Bill Perez, nobody knows that name, right? But tell you what, he was at SC Johnson for over a decade, was very successful, was very monumental with their growth, right? So SC Johnson,
Yep.
cleaning products, all that, candles and crap, right? Um, he actually made a swap and signed on to join Phil Knight over at Nike. Okay, so here's Perez, a proven leader with a big company, a huge company, yet within 13 months, gone from Nike.
Wow.
Yeah, gone. And in the words, I'm going to quote Mr. Phil Knight here, old shoe dog himself, the cultural leap was too great for Bill, right?
Hmm.
So here's the thing. From that standpoint, I say that Billy's on the hot seat. Okay, fine, whatever. Gauntlet of a schedule coming up. I know we'll talk about that, and a couple of other things that didn't go quite our way with recruiting, but I must say we finished up well. It's really tough to hear some of these things because people, it takes time. It really does take time. And I get the results aspect of it. It's not there. It just takes time. And that's what's hard to see about this. And again, some people might not get the whole CEO thing, but I directly relate that to a head coach, especially a college football head coach. And you look at the ultimate CEO, the old Sith Lord himself, Nick Saban. And whether it was the internal health of his family, his wife, whatever, or just what was happening to change the game,
Yeah.
he's not here anymore, you know. And so, anyways, that's what I wanted to address tonight, B, with talking about the noise, talking about time, talking about what's been done thus far, which we'll get into. But I just want to kind of point out those couple of things real quick. And my thing has always been to other Gator fans that we talk to on a regular basis is, okay, there's this problem, there's this problem, there's this problem. That's I get the problems. Give me a solution.
Yep.
Give me something else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Don't just because anytime I've always combated some of those conversations with, great, who do you go out and get? Well, I don't know,
Right.
you know? So that's
Right.
just tough. Anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, for sure. So love some of the points you brought up there. Love the tie into the CEO piece. For what it's worth, I do think there's more to it than just being a CEO, but I absolutely agree that you are the CEO, right? That is absolutely a function of the job role for sure. I'm not sure if it's the only function, though we may see that it becomes more of the job function as this NIL thing continues to grow, but that's another conversation entirely,
Yeah. Yeah.
one that we'll talk more about next week, or 2 weeks, excuse me. But I think this is important to address, right? So when we're talking about Napier and where we go from here, it's important to address the I guess the prevailing opinion. I don't know if it's really prevailing for the record. I do see both sides of the aisle get talked about here, if you will, right? It's pump the brakes, you know, hold your horses. He's still working on it. Give him time. And then I also see fire him today. He's not getting it done.
Yeah.
Forget more time. He doesn't even need to see the third season. We already know what we're getting with him. Get him out. Right. So and there doesn't
Yep.
seem to be a whole lot of in between those two, which I guess there's not a whole lot of in between really in those two opinions. But regardless, I think what I see more of is, a negative, certainly a negative trend, if not a negative overall opinion at this point. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. Maybe not a lot of reasons why. There's one clear reason why, right? There's not enough results quickly, right? You mentioned it. We haven't won enough. We haven't won enough. We haven't won enough, period. That's really what it comes down to, right? The results haven't been there yet. But I would make the argument that winning on the field isn't the only result that matters. I know, pump the brakes, hold your phone. Don't turn off the pod, Gator Nation. Hang on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I agree that is the most important result, but it is not the only one that matters. And the reason I say that is look at the coaches we have had in the past that have had 10 or 11 win seasons. Were they good coaches? Was Jim McElwain a good coach? No, he was not. He had a 10-win season. I think he actually had an 11-win season. That's crazy. How did Jim
Yeah.
McElwain have an 11-win season? I have no idea for the record. Favorable schedule, got some lucky bounces. I don't know. Will Muschamp had a 10-win season. Will Muschamp cannot coach. That is proven. He can't be a head coach anyway. That is proven. South Carolina, if we didn't prove it, South Carolina damn sure proved it, right? He cannot be a head coach. He does not work as a head coach, certainly not in the SEC anyway. It just does not work for Will Muschamp to be it is proven fact now, right? Has been tried and tried again. It does not work. Yet he had a 10-win season. So is winning all that matters? No, I don't think that it is. Again, I would argue it is the most important thing at the end of the day, long term. However, it's not all that matters. And I certainly don't think it's all that matters when you look at the upfront circumstances that Billy was presented with. And we'll talk more about that later. We'll get into some more detail in regards to that. But it's not everything, especially not in the beginning. And I think that's really important to keep some perspective around. And I also think it's really important to keep some perspective around when you look at who Napier is and how he operates. And this is also really, really important as it relates specifically to Billy. And I think this is where also patience is going to be key when you look at him. Now, I'm not making it sounds like I'm making this big case for keeping Napier. We'll get into a lot more about this, and I think we'll see that, I'm actually a little on the fence about it, not keeping him right now, but long term. I don't know if he's going to be the guy long term. So just put that out there right from the beginning. I'm not sure, to be honest. However, that's the whole point, is I don't know yet. It still needs more time. And there are things I want to see this coming season to help me make that determination and whether or not I think he should have more time. However, there could get to a point at the end of next season that I think he needs more time. And then there are things I want to see the season after that, and so on and so on. Like, and not like in perpetuity, for the record. Winning does need to come as a part of this. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that it's not the only measure of success. It's not the only measure we need to be grading on. It is certainly one of the most, if not the most important, as I said, but it's not the only thing that we need to be looking at. And I think to the point here, this is why he's been graded the way that he has. And everybody's trying to throw the book at him, or maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are trying to throw the book at him. So that's a really important thing to look at and examine to start this thing off, and kind of why, if you're hearing some of this talk, I think certainly why you are hearing it. But we want to dive in and kind of take a look at, okay, is that really right? And I think if you haven't already figured it out from listening to Randy and I talk briefly in this segment, we both think we're not ready to go there yet, right? It's too soon. There's too much that still needs to be established and potentially looked at before we're ready to make that decision. So to that end, let's take a look at what is working with Billy so far, right? Let's kind of examine that. So first kind of question in regards to this is Billy's ideal structure in place? Is his organizational chart complete? Well, before a couple of weeks ago, I would have said definitively yes. I think he's gotten that all together and put it all in place. And then we lost our strength and conditioning coach, and then we lost his second O-line coach, which I don't know that he necessarily needs, but he seems to think he does. So I think for the most part, again, the answer here is yes. Building the organizational structure out to what he wanted it to be should now be finished, other than, I'll say, the tweaks that are needed from year to year. So a couple of tweaks here. We did fill the strength and conditioning spot today. Mr. Miller, who was already on staff as an assistant, has actually been promoted to strength and conditioning coach. Actually really like the promotion. Bunch of guys within the locker room, within the team, were calling for this promotion after Fitz left the program. Pretty happy with this promotion and this hire. I like his range of experience. I won't get into some whole big talking point about this, but I think this was a good move. Additionally to that, I don't know what we're going to see happen with this secondary O-line coach. Probably at the end of the day, we hire another O-line coach, knowing how Billy values having two of these coaches and thinks the importance of this, really matters to the team. I think that's likely what you end up seeing here. I'm not a huge fan of this, organizationally speaking, but this is his structure, right? So the point is he has this in place now. And that's important because he doesn't have to worry about building it anymore, right? And that's been a thing that's been being put in place and built out and constructed and tweaked and evaluated, right? And again, it gets evaluated every year by the staff, though I am wondering a little about the evaluation in the offseason on certain things. I think he's doing a fine job in evaluating some parts, but then there's other parts like evaluating play calling, for example, and whether or not this was really the right move. We'll get to that in a minute. Culture improvement. While this is an ongoing process, I really think we have seen nothing short of a massive shift in the direction of this team's culture. From when you look at when Mullen left here and the state of the culture of this program being in nothing short of shambles. If you look at comments and critiques, there was, again, a whole article, we've talked about it before, on the culture of the Mullen era and how just disgusting it was, quite frankly, in my opinion. And what you see coming from Napier's players as it relates to camaraderie, the development of the team, the development of the players as people, the overall sideline demeanor of the coaches and how they relate to the players during games, during practice, the whole thing. It's couldn't be more different. It is a massive shift in culture, right? It's huge. And that matters. Like, that matters in a big way, in a positive way, in my opinion. Like, without question, like, I don't think you can sustain long-term success regardless of talent, regardless of coaching, with a culture that Mullen had in place. I just don't believe you can. I believe ultimately your players are not going to care. They're not going to have passion to win for you. And no matter what you put out there, if your players don't have heart for the team, heart for the university, heart for each other, you're not going to be successful at the highest levels. Maybe you have enough success to be decent because of the talent, because of the coaching, because of, things that you're able, scheme, whatever you're able to put on the field, but you are going to be limited, period. What Napier is putting in place allows you, at least from the culture perspective, to be at the highest level, the absolute highest level, right? There are coaches that have proved this out over time. Dabo is the shining example of this, right? Dabo's culture is second to none, right? He has shown this time and time again. Now, I know Clemson's been down the last couple of years because of some talent stuff, because of potentially some coaching stuff, right? They're not the same without Venables, right? That's all been talked about. But ultimately, that the culture in that program is historically outstanding. So this really, really matters. The last point I'll make here is recruiting. Despite some very challenging NIL headwinds, again, things we will talk about in a future pod. We get some really good stuff coming on this NIL pod in a couple of weeks. I'm excited to bring it to you, but we won't put the cart before the horse on that. Billy's recruiting has improved in ranking, and I would argue in overall class talent, regardless of ranking, each year he has been here, right? Each class has gotten better by the numbers and certainly by the talent at the positions. Overall, it has gotten better despite these headwinds that he has been running up against. Right now, you can make an argument for, okay, he didn't, put his staff in place the way he should have. He didn't handle some of the NIL challenges the way he should have. Okay, I'll give you that there have been some things that have not been handled by he and his staff maybe as best as they could have been. However, a lot of NIL is outside of his control. A lot of NIL is not in his purview. It's nothing he can particularly do about it because he is separated from it by definition of the rules that Florida actually follows where they're supposed to, right? We've, again, discussed this and what Florida does that other schools don't do, period. So we won't get into that conversation again, but looking at this, there has been solid improvement there. So to me, when you look at it, building out his structure, the improvement in culture, and the improvement in recruiting have been the things that are really working well for him. That's where I would highlight. What do you got for what's working for Billy?
Yeah, I would echo that, B, 100%. When you look at the structures in place, the organizational charts there, we just got to move around. He's playing chess a little bit, right? I
Yeah.
get it. Ron Roberts coming in. Most people look at that and scratch their heads, but what most people don't realize is, his mentee is our very own AA. So I think that's great. We'll see what happens with special teams. I get it, Fitz left, but people, if you don't know anything about Tyler Miles as a strength and conditioning program, who's going to take over? Here's the thing. B, I'll get into it here in a second, but long story short, Miles has been opening or overseeing winter workouts since Fitz left. All right. So before UF, Miles was at Duke. He was at Miami. And not to mention, he was at Boost Performance, a high-end outfit in Nashville, Tennessee, right?
That's the part I love.
Yeah.
That's the
working
part I
with
love.
Athletes on what? Combine training and
Combine
NFL
training, baby. Yes.
Right. So interesting enough. And by the way, Mark Hawk still here somewhere. He is, no disrespect to Mark Hawk, but he's just that tag along fella that they just have a bond, and it is what it is. So he's been reassigned to player development, messaging, motivation, and themes. Again, I didn't realize he was a thespian, but whatever. He also created a spot for chief of staff. So we'll see what happens as that gets filled. Russ Callaway, I'm not sure if you saw this quote, but Russ Callaway will acquire more responsibility. I know we hinted at Russ Callaway, OC. Whatever. Okay. Russ Callaway.
I won't rule it out, but I don't think it's happening.
Yeah, definitely not going to happen. But can he be involved in enrollment? Whatever. That fine. And of course, we know Darnell Stapleton, the latest departure. He left for Washington because, of course, he and Dan Quinn were good friends. Dan Quinn, if y'all don't know, used to be a D coordinator here at University of Florida years ago. But either way, the chart is there. The structure is there. Might just have to work around some pieces or not, right? So outside of that, I think going back to my tie-in from that first point about the whole talk about CEO, I think that is going to be a prevalent look moving forward. So that's going to be good. Culture, you said it, and I'll just basically say this. In my high school officiating, I've got some people at the higher level that are on the sideline for Florida Gator games in the Swamp, that handle the down markers, that look at charts, things like that. And all I'm saying is that those gentlemen noticed the way coaches spoke to players and officials from the Mullen to the Napier era. It was night and day. It was night and
Yep.
day.
Yep.
So I'll just leave that as it is. Gatorade and what and you mentioned it, but what he brought from Clemson and what in bits and pieces he brought from Alabama, uh, when it comes to the development of these players as young men and future leaders, phenomenal. So I think the right thing is happening behind closed doors, and not to mention, yes, we had some recruiting woes, but come on, to go from 13 to 16, or I'm sorry, to go for third to 16 or 17, now back down to 6, right? Talk about recruiting to the whistle. And as I would put a shameless plug in here for our very own Mr. Tom Petty, we won't back down. And he clearly is not backing down. He's a great salesman. And I don't say that as in a used car salesman. He's a great salesman. He has great tact, and he's able to connect with families and recruits. That's great. And the other thing, too, and going back to the whole NIL conversation and throwing the bag at kids, Napier wants players who want to play for Florida. They want to play in the Swamp, the allure of the Swamp, the allure of the orange and blue. He doesn't just want guys to get this money and get this bag. And he's definitely not going to beg. I don't see him as a beggar. And so based off of that, when you look at how he's structuring the conversation around why you need to come play at Florida, young man, why you're going to be highlighted in Florida, young man. Hey, mom, dad, this is the culture we have here. This is what we're trying to do to these young men, not just look at them as student athletes, not just looking at them for their height and their weight and their top 40 speed. These are the other things that we're trying to build these young men into. So I think those things are definitely working in his favor.
I like it. I do have to call out the recruiting class only came up to 10th in overall ranking. It was 6th in average player ranking, but the class ranking was 10th. So
No, you're right.
do
Yeah,
have to put
yeah,
that up.
correct.
But
I misspoke.
otherwise, I'm right there with you. No, I think you're spot on all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, pretty much we're in alignment there for the most part. So, yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And really, there's a lot of things that I think are working. Love what you said about checkers, man. I think that's a really important point to bring up here. And again, we'll talk a little more about it, or I'm planning to talk a little more about it later.
Yeah.
This is a long game for him, right? He is playing the long game. He is not playing the watch me come out here and blow you away with an amazing season and then well, I couldn't do it again. That is not his plan. That has never been his plan. He is trying to build. And again, I'll talk about it more in depth later on, but it's really important to keep that in mind with how Napier is trying to go about this, how he's been trying to go about this since day one. So with that, let's move on. What isn't working? Give me your thoughts. What are the things that haven't gone well so far, and where does he need to improve as we continue to move forward here?
Yeah. So a couple things. The eye test, right? Or as I think the popular term that a lot of people use post COVID was the optics, right? The eye test on the field,
Yep.
it didn't pass a lot of times,
Yep.
right? It just didn't pass. Speaking to culture, speaking to systems, speaking to organization. Shouldn't those things that are happening behind closed doors, that are happening in all those meetings, the player development meeting, the leadership team meeting, the athlete leadership team meeting, all those things, shouldn't those translate to on the field results? And I say that with
Yeah.
rhetorically,
Yeah.
but I
I
know,
hear you.
I know, and it's tough because, and I say that mainly because of what we saw last season, and I'll cite two things specifically, two games specifically. When you have those things in place, granted, it takes a long time for kids, especially young kids that are higher themselves and that are very talented and very physically talented, of course, to buy in to a vision, a mission. I get it. But at the same time, with all those things happening, and here's the thing, Billy's a winner. He really is a winner. I mean, what person does not like, what person is content with losing? First thing. Second thing is the close losses to Arkansas and Missouri.
Yeah.
Arkansas and Missouri. Now, there are some other games, of course, we know that were in question. Two games specifically that, for lack of a better term, we got trucked. I'll just say that because that's a term I like to use with our DBs of
There you go.
Florida. But Arkansas and Missouri, those are games, especially Arkansas in overtime. Those are games that you've thought, okay, because of the grit, the mental toughness, the physical toughness, the emotional toughness that he talks about, I would have hoped those are translated on the field. And so that was tough not to see. The talent pool.
Yep.
Some people say it was coaching. Some people say it was talent. There are a lot of people out there who believe that, okay, well, I might not have the most talented guys, but because I have a system and because I have this coaching and because I have all these other things around them, it raises the talent gap. It raises
See
the bill,
Washington.
i.e., bingo.
Yeah.
Exactly. So why couldn't we get every single last star out of some of the talent that we had on the field?
Yep.
That was tough to see.
Yep.
It was tough. We talked about snaps. We talked about how many of our game changers, makers, that didn't get the right snaps.
Yep.
Okay. We started the season 5-2. We started season 5-2 and finished 5-7. Jiminy Cricket, are you kidding me?
Yep.
And then oftentimes ill-prepared, undisciplined, and we lost physical battles. I get it, we play in the SEC, but there are a lot of times in those games, i.e., conditioning,
Yeah.
that we looked gassed and we looked like we just got mauled in the trenches, whereas we know SEC football reigns. So those are some of the things that I saw that wasn't working, that hopefully can be corrected here in a short period of time. B.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I've literally one dot for this, and then I have some sub dots under it, but I have one dot, and you hit on it right to start. The one dot I have for what isn't working is on-field execution. Period. That's all I got. It's literally the only thing that I have that isn't working. I honestly believe that everything else that Napier has been doing, the changes that he's made, the things that he's put in place, I think they're all in the vein and in the nature and in the direction that I would like to see. All of it. It's all good. It's all pointing up. It's all moving in the correct direction, with the exception of the results, right? So this is what we talked about at the beginning. The most important result is not there, right? So what isn't working is the on-field execution. So while, again, I'm very pleased to see the other pieces that also do matter, right? That help you get to on-field execution, consistent on-field execution, at least in theory. The most important piece being that on-field execution is not working, at least as of yet. So my sub dot points here, my breakdown is three things. First, procedural issues. Not going to go into a diatribe. We all know about them. We've all talked about them. Many a visor throw has been had in regards to them, right?
Oh, yeah.
End of story. I expect that this will get better in 24 now that the organizational structure is built the way that it should be, right? Completed, done, again, for the most part, other than the tweaks. The time and the effort and the need to focus on these things should now be steadfastly in place, right, for this team, so that this stuff is cleaned up the way it should be, the way, frankly, it should have been already, in my opinion. This was a miss last year. First year, whatever. Last year, nah, it really shouldn't have happened, especially not to the extent it did. It better be better this year, period. I'll leave it at that. I've got more comments on it later when we talk about, changes we have seen and the ramifications of them or lack thereof, but we'll get into that later. So that's number one. Number two, our offense is mid. We've talked about this, right? There are positives to it. It got better at the end of the year last year. I think it still can and hopefully will improve, but it's limited by the fact that Napier will still be calling plays, period. At the end of the day, we've talked about it. He's got tendencies. He's got things that he does, especially in certain situations, right? There's situational things that he does that I do not expect to change. And assuming that they don't change for some of those in-game situations, right? I expect us to still be relatively mid. Is there room for improvement next year? Do I think we potentially will improve next year, assuming that the O-line is at least, somewhat improved over this year, which is an assumption because it may not be. But the answer is yes. I think we will improve. Do I see us having the potential for like a meteoric rise in the offense next year with Napier still being the play caller? No, I don't see that. I just don't. I think, again, there are tendencies that I see on film that he does, again, situationally, that I don't foresee changing. I've seen him consistently for 2 years. I do not see that changing, and I think that is very evident on film. I think it is very easy to plan for and coach against, and I think that will be detrimental. So now those situations don't always arise, they don't always happen, right? But when they do, you know what's coming. And if you're the opposing coach, you know how to plan for that, and that's a problem. So ultimately, assuming that does end up being what's happening. Now, again, I won't rule out the possibility of Callaway getting more involved or even getting fully involved as a play caller, but I don't see it as likely, at least not this season. And I think for that reason, we're going to continue to be somewhat limited there. However, it doesn't mean we can't improve. I just don't see dramatic improvement as being possible. Third point here is the defense obviously has not been good at all. There's really no two ways around it. However, it did show signs of growth last year under Armstrong, of course, as we have discussed. And I still fully believe that with the changes in personnel and the changes in coaching and potentially some of the changes that are going to take place in the offseason here, we can take a huge step forward on defense next year. I really still believe that is possible. Don't know that it will happen, but see it as absolutely being something that can happen. Still very hopeful that it will happen, obviously. That I do believe can happen. That big leap there, I do see as being possible. And that potentially means some really good things. Frankly, I think it's going to need to happen for us to even have a glimpse of being a decent team next year with this schedule. So again, we'll take a look at that as time goes on. But moving on from there. So those are my kind of biggest things that I see. It's really just a straight call out of the positional stuff on offense and then the procedural stuff. I mean, or not offense, I'm sorry, offense and defense, and then the procedural stuff. That's really what it boils down to. That's where the lack of success has been, right? And that's what needs to get better. Can it? Yeah. Will it? I don't know. We'll see. That's really all I know to say at this point. Hopefully, yes. Definitively, who knows? So time will tell, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Because if it doesn't, then there are real questions here as to where we go moving forward. So what are the biggest changes that we have seen with Billy so far? We already talked about culture, but aside from the culture that he's brought, what are some of the changes that we've seen from a culture personnel standpoint? One of the things we want to talk about here are some of the dismissals that we've seen on the team, or some of the changes as it relates to the team. So the big example here is obviously Brenton Cox. You had an extremely talented guy, right, that ended up getting thrown off the team. If that doesn't show you that Billy's serious about the culture that he's bringing here, that if you are not going to buy in to the culture that he is, definitely going to uphold at Florida, then you're not going to be a part of it, period. So I think when you look at it, he is very, very, I already said the word serious, but I don't know what else to say, definitive, right, about his process and the things that he's going to implement. They are going to be here as long as he is here. And if you're not going to be a part of that, then you're not going to be a part of this team. You're not going to be a part of this organization. I think that very well may have played into some of the changes that were made on defense with the coaching staff, because I didn't necessarily see huge performance issues on the D-line last year from a coaching standpoint, right? We had strength and conditioning issues, yes. Did we have poor play there from an execution standpoint? I don't necessarily think so. And yet, Sean Spencer is no longer here. One of the first two coaches that Napier has ever fired as a head coach, by the way. He never fired a head coach before Corey Raymond or Sean Spencer. Fun fact for those that don't know. So that's really enlightening, right? Now Raymond, I can find a performance argument for. It's hard for me to find a performance argument for Sean Spencer. So it really makes me wonder if there's a cultural thing there. I don't know. I'm speculating. That's a guess, right? I don't know. But it's hard for me to find anything on film that stands out that says, yeah, those guys just weren't playing the way they should have been playing, right? Or weren't being coached the way they should be coached. I don't know, but I can't see it on film. Let's put it that way. So ultimately, I think if you don't buy into Napier's culture at Florida, you're not going to be here very long. That's a big thing for him. You have to be a part of the direction he wants to go. Like you said, he wants guys that want to be here and want to be a part of the orange and blue and want to be a part of this growth, a part of this build, a part of this development, a part of this process. And if you're not, then this isn't the place for you. He said as much on the day of or day before early national signing day, right?
Yep.
It's cool. If you don't want to be here, that's fine. It's fine. All good. Wish you well. I mean, that's powerful. That's powerful because I think he really means it. And it's a little dangerous potentially, but it's also really powerful to have that kind of belief in what you're doing. So that's definitely a change that we've seen. The other change we already talked about is the organization and the staffing, right? We've talked about it many times. We joked about it, the picture, right? The organizational picture where you have more coaches than players, right? That's a huge change when you look at Florida from previous years, when you look at the staffing versus where it is now. And it's huge. It's been a significant change under his tenure. The issue I most have with this is that we haven't necessarily seen those changes yield the results you would want, right? You should see organizational and procedural excellence when you have that many people looking at film. And it shouldn't just be penalties, right? Or getting the right players on the field or not having two number threes out there or whatever, right? Like it shouldn't just be that stuff. That stuff should be there, but it should also be like always making the right analytical decision in game. Because you have 14 analysts studying all the film and giving you these scenarios potentially in the during the week before leading up, and you've got all these things played out in advance, as many as you possibly can. So when this scenario comes up, you go back and you say, oh yeah, we looked at this and I want to do this in this situation. So this is what I'm going to do. That's not what I've seen happen. It's been, oh, this is the situation. In this situation, I do this. Oh, we're in this situation again. Oh, I do this. It's again goes back to those tendencies we talked about, right? As a play caller, I don't necessarily see all the things I would expect to see with this big organization and all these analysts and all these grad assistants and all this potential for information coming in. We haven't necessarily seen those results. I still think this has the potential to improve this year overall. But if we don't see significant changes in multiple different areas, really, in regards to this, then I have big questions here in relation to how Billy actually looks as a CEO. Because it's one thing to put this staff in place, it's another thing to use it properly. And I'm not sure that that's happening if we don't see some of this stuff actually come to fruition this season. So those are my thoughts on the biggest changes that we've seen. What do you got for that?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, line by line. This is very interesting. First is I was actually going to reference the team pick, right? Having more staff and coaches than actual players, which caught a lot of flack. Yeah, caught a lot of flack, right?
Yeah.
So that was huge. Obviously, Gatorade has to be mentioned. Gatorade's made a huge difference in these players and kind of what they're doing to build these players as young men. Discipline, the systems, the mental, the physical, the emotional toughness, those things are attempting and trying to be embedded into a lot of thick 18, 19, 20-year-old skulls. I get it. Ideally with that, hopefully, and you referenced Brenton, so I will not, but hopefully no more LSU incidents. Right?
Yeah, for real.
Because we have a high level of respect and ownership in what we do, and that's the other thing too. I two things I was going to quote him. You reference on early national signing day was, if you're on the fence about coming to Florida, then you shouldn't be here.
Right.
I know he caught a
Right.
lot of flack for that, but again, very definitive. Not, I mean, a lot of truth behind that. Okay, I know we're in this culture nowadays where it's really hard to listen to truth, but it is what it is. And then the other thing I like what he said about when the results came in, about the class and kind of what happened between early National Signing Day and with everything finished up here a couple weeks ago was we really went for high character kids that had high character leadership traits in addition to their production in the portal. So that's huge. You can see that build in right to the culture as far as what they're looking for and what they think that what he thinks that can help them improve upon that foundation of the culture moving forward. Situational football, I was going to say, has been lackluster. We know that because all these other things should translate, right? And the
Yep.
last thing I'll reference is the biggest change is hopefully we don't have Billy's not going to dress up like Darth Vader on Halloween. So on that basis,
Love
we
it.
have someone
Love it.
who I'm just saying, someone who is accountable, right? Someone who digs the ownership. He might dodge a question here or there, but at the end of the day, he's not going to be the kind of coach who is going to yell at a reporter, who's going to raise his arms, who's going to leave the podium. He's going to stand there and take it, and he might deflect a little bit, but at the end of the day, he knows he has to be that voice because his players are looking at him for that, and he's got to live that out first and foremost.
Yeah, for sure. And for the record, he gets a lot of flack, I think, for not answering questions in press conferences. Keep it up, Billy. I don't care. Not
Yeah.
not don't answer every question. I could not care less how you perform in a press conference, right? As long as you're not like a jerk, right? Don't be an a-hole, but as long as you're not that, like, you're fine. Like, you are totally fine. As long as you are not, totally disrespectful, as some coaches tend to be, which I do not agree with at all. I think it's part of your job. You're paid to do it. If you want to deflect, if you want to, basically give the political answer, right, and basically talk about nothing for 5 minutes when they ask you a question, I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that. As far as I'm concerned, you do not need to win the press conference in order to be successful as a head coach. I've never thought that was important. I know Lane Kiffin gets a lot of credit for doing that. Who cares? Who cares? I never thought that mattered one bit. As long as you're not a jerk, because that I don't think is acceptable considering the amount of money you're paid, right? It's always ticked me off. Personal thing here. I always hated Belichick and Popovich on the podium, right, when they're dealing with this
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
I
your
couldn't
two
stand them.
favorites.
Could not stand them because I always thought they just had this horrible attitude with the media, and like they were always too good and too, it always felt like they were so annoyed to be there. And it's like, guess what? You get paid millions of dollars, and this is part of your job. So shut up and deal with it. So that always just drove me bananas. Don't be like that. But aside from that, like, I don't care what you do. Aside from that, I do not care. It's totally fine. So I never had issue with that. But anyway, total segue there, and apologies. But I'm very much with you on the rest of that. So to that end, are the changes that he had made, or that he has made, excuse me, are they enough? Um, Currently and going forward to next season, not beyond that, but just this year, right now, and going into next season, are the changes he's made enough? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, it has to be. No, but seriously, when I look at all is it enough? I look at the changes over the past couple of years compared to the previous three, and it's been an
Yep.
absolute overhaul, right? You can't be doing all that behind closed doors for 2 years and not see some fruit start to bear. You
Yep.
really can't, right? And
Yep.
so I think this is what's tough, right? You have the gauntlet of this schedule, which according to 24/7, we have the I know we don't reference them a lot, but the hardest schedule in the nation. That was published a couple of days
Yeah.
ago. But the
Multiple
other thing,
multiple different sources are starting to say that now.
yeah, it is. But that's the thing. Outside of that schedule, all these other things are coming into fruition. And not to mention you talk about culture shift. One thing that we hadn't mentioned yet was the amount of purging of culture when you talk
Yep.
about Mullen players, right?
Yeah, we didn't
So
talk about
now,
that a lot, but not just dismissals, but how many Mullen guys left in the portal, right?
bingo.
Like a ton left in the portal.
So look at that. So Billy's got his guys, Billy's got his staff, he's got the structure, he's got okay. Billy's proven he can do some things well. Now, with some of these things in place, you referenced it earlier, B. Can he now take some of that weight? He still has a 10,000-pound gorilla on him, but did he alleviate 2 or 3,000 pounds off of it? Maybe. The offense is going to be the biggest piece, bar none. So, in going into year 3, right? We can't not have all this other action behind the scenes and behind closed doors and leadership meetings and development and player development and roster development and personnel and this beautiful $90 million player facility, and all these things happen and nothing happens. It's almost like playing office, right? You're going to the office every
Yep.
day. You're going to the office. You're dressing up in the suit, the blazer, the slacks. You got the swag on. You got joggers on. You got the nice, and nothing's happening. You're not producing, right? Needs to happen. The other thing that has not been enough that needs to change. He needs a dog. Everyone knows the famous press conference years ago, right? We need more dogs, not
Yep.
cats,
Yep.
right? Not how's my hair, how's my headband, how's my swoosh? No, he needs some dogs. And so on offense, it's got to be either Trey or Graham. On defense, it's going to be either Wingo, Marshall, and yes, I know he's returning from injury, but Justice Boone has the ability to do that. So that's the biggest thing that's going to change with these impact players, with the addition of these younger bucks. That's going to take time. That's going to take develop. That's going to take nurturing. I get that. So those things have to matriculate. Let's face it, his play calling isn't necessarily why the Gators finished 5-7. Not fully.
Not fully, no. Not fully, no.
Right? The offense was still ranked nationally number 18 or 19, depending on your source, as we found out doing this pod. Statistics don't always line up in national passing efficiency. Okay. And we get it. Eli Drinkowitz, Ryan Day, Jimbo Fisher stopped calling plays to spend more time on big picture issues. Fisher ended it differently, as we know. Look at Hugh Freeze and what he did, right? He focused more on recruiting. And if people don't remember, Hugh Freeze was the one who flipped Amaris Williams and Jamonta Walker. So there's some other things there that hopefully we see happen. The shift, either is Russ or somebody else coming on the OC side. But the one thing that I am confident, and I don't believe he said this just for quote unquote good sportsmanship, but if y'all remember at the end of the Florida-Georgia game in the press conference, Coach Smart said, Billy Napier is doing the right things to be successful down there. Y'all just watch and see. Okay. I'll take it for what it is. But is it enough, B? For right now, it has to be. It has to work, because against the schedule's against him. A lot of other things are against him. But if this fall of 24 does not go swimmingly, or at least for we can see, if we can pass the eye test, we can mean some really close games, and we can show a lot of effort, and we score about what? 6, 7, 8 more points a game. Here's a fun fact. Last year, points per game, fall of 23, 28.4 points per game. 28.4, right? Not that good.
No, that's the problem with the stat.
60th.
Passing efficiency may have been 18th, but 60th in points per game, right? That's the
Thank
problem.
you. 28.4, 60th FBS rank, right? In wins, our points per game, and in only 5 wins. In wins, 35.8. In losses, 23.1.
Yeah, good call.
Unbelievable.
Good call.
Total yards per game, 409.1, 49th in the nation of FBS. Passing yards per game, 259, 45th in the nation. Rushing yards per game, 149, tied for 77th in the nation. Almost a 70-yard drop-off from the previous year. And,
right.
And then what he likes to talk about, explosive plays, 20-plus yard plays, 60 last fall, tied for 44th in the nation. That has got to change. And so with that, That's what I'm saying, man.
So, so question about your answer. What does it has to be enough mean? Does that mean yes? Because I don't know what
I'll
that
tell you.
means.
I'll tell you what. I'll make it a definitive yes, because with all this other crap happening behind the scenes, the shift in personnel, the shift in coaching, the recruiting, again, I get it. We're not a top rank, 1, 2, or 3 ranked recruiting class, but some of the guys that we have coming in here, I think is going to make a huge difference moving forward over the next 2 seasons. Their impact will be felt on that field. So I will say yes.
All right. Okay. Um, I'll agree. I'm not a definitive yes for the record, but I will agree that it's a yes. Barely. I think it's still enough that he's done so far, but he's flirting with the line for
So
me.
so
He's
you're it has to be as well.
I guess so. I guess so. No, I think it's been enough so far, despite the lack of on-field results. However, I will discuss more about why I think it's enough later in a section we'll get to at the end. But there has to be visible improvement in multiple areas next year for it to continue to be enough going forward, right? And we already mentioned this, right? The things that have to improve, they really do have to improve next season, right? Now that you've gotten this stuff in place, now that the recruiting has improved the last couple of seasons, and again, I don't expect a ton of freshmen to play next year, not near as many as we saw this year. Please don't, quite frankly, because that wouldn't be good. Um, it, but we do need to see improvement next year. We do. Now, again, in this case, I'm going to tell you that doesn't necessarily come in the form of wins and losses. The schedule has to be factored in. Again, we'll discuss, but um, but there has to be no visible improvement in multiple areas come next year, and I'll leave it at that. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Yes, it's enough, just enough, but it is enough so far, in my opinion, that I'm good. I'm good with the things that I've seen, but he is flirting with the line because of a couple things. Really, he wouldn't even be flirting with the line for me if it weren't for a few of these procedural things, a few of these organizational things that I just haven't seen the development of the way I would have expected. If it weren't for that, I would honestly be fine. I would be a definitive yes. Those are the things that got me a little hesitant, to be honest. The rest of the stuff I think is absolutely good and pointed in the right direction. It's those things that have got me on the fence. So will it continue to be enough long term beyond next year? Assuming we get there, there has to be continuous progression, right? This is what you have to factor in about Napier. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Napier is extremely systematic. He's probably one of the most systematic coaches I've maybe ever seen. He is not a flash in the pan kind of guy, right? We talked about this. He is not going to be the guy that comes in and says, watch this, I'll give you a 10-win season. Next year, we're going 6-6, but I'm giving you 10 wins right now. That's not him. He does not make splashes. He builds and he builds and he builds and he builds. And when you do that over time, you can make something really, really great. You really can, in theory. However, if that building does not amount to what you want it to over that time, then it has all been for naught. And that is really the question we have to ask about Billy. Do we see enough growth year in, year out, year over year, time over time? Do we see enough to give him the time over the years as we go? So I mentioned this earlier. I alluded to it earlier. This is a really, really important point as it relates to Billy specifically. I don't think you can use other coaches as a measuring stick for Billy. I really don't. I think you have to say, okay, are the metrics that Billy should be exceeding in getting better year over year? Right now that some of this stuff is in place, especially is his recruiting continuing to improve up to a point where it's really, really good, and then does it sustain, right? Because eventually you can't improve it anymore, right? But does it get better again in 25? Does it potentially maybe even get a little better in 26 until it's really, like top 5 or better every year? Because it should be. He's good enough for that as a recruiter. That's a realistic expectation for him at the University of Florida, to consistently have top 5 classes. Realistic expectation. That's what you should be looking for potentially as early as next year, definitely by 2026. That's what should be happening. Now, there's a potential roadblock there. Again, we'll talk about it next week. But barring that being a long-term roadblock in NIL, that's a potential measuring stick for him that I think you can actually, grade on. Are the staffing changes that need to be made in the offseason, each offseason, being made appropriately? Is he making the correct coaching decisions? I think he's done a lot of things this offseason that were good. I think he's made a lot of changes that were good. There's a couple I think he missed on, OC being the biggest one. We've already talked about it. Now, again, there's a small potential there that some things do get better. And hey, maybe I'm wrong about what happens next year. Maybe because he's got more attention that he can give to this, even if he is the play caller and he has less attention focused elsewhere during the season, he does a better job. He has less of these tendencies. He's more aggressive with the playbook. He opens it up more. He does more things. Maybe that happens. I'm willing to say that's possible. I'll say there's a world where that exists. I won't say it's can't happen, right? But do I think it's the likely scenario based on what I've seen for 2 straight years? No, I don't. People have tendencies, especially when it comes to play calling, right? It's a known thing. I would be surprised if we saw that. But could it happen? Sure. I won't rule it out. He's shown flashes of that at times. South Carolina game last year, Tennessee game 2 years ago. He's shown that he can put things on film that are different, that are better, right? We talked about it. So can that happen? Maybe. Do I think it will? No, not overly likely. But that doesn't mean that, again, we can't improve and there are things that can't get better overall, especially considering some of the things that are going on with personnel. So the long game here is, for me, with Napier, is do you see improvements as things progress year over year over year over year, working to a product that eventually, by the time you get to 25, where you're solidly in the playoff conversation, 26, where you're definitely contending for a national championship, 27 where you're doing the same, 28 where you're doing the same, 29, like that's the kind of thing that he should be building towards. Consistent contention for national championships. Ultimately, what he's trying to build is the kind of success year in and year out that Georgia has now, that Bama has had for a long time. That's what he's trying to do. Now, I know everybody says, well, everybody's trying to do that. Okay, but the way he's going about trying to do it is a very systematic, time delayed format to get there, right? Because he's building it piece by piece. And it's really, really important to keep that in mind. So if you see the progression in Napier as the years go along, and I would argue we did see some progression last year, but it wasn't as much as I would have liked, frankly. Last year was a little bit of a setback year for me. If we don't see some movement in that progression next year, I've got real questions, as we already talked about, as to whether or not this is the direction we want to continue to go as a program. I really do think that is true. However, on the contrary to that, if we do see progression, then I'm all in, because I think this is the kind of guy that can build you to a place where you have long-term sustainment. That's what this kind of building can do. Consistent recruitment, great culture, coaching that does work after you figure it out and put it in place and have your staff and have your organization. All those things that do work once you have them figured out. He shows that that can start to come into place this year. And again, doesn't necessarily mean it happens with record, but, and I'm not saying that like he should have another 5-7 season for the record. I don't think that gets it done. But there may not be some drastic improvement, right? We talked about it. 7-5 is a successful season next year with this schedule. It just is. But if you see 7-5 with a lot of close games next year, and that team looks better, because you can eye test it, that team looks better next year, and we go 7-5 and we're in a lot of close games. Yeah, I think in all likelihood, that's a very general way to say it. Obviously, we'll break it down as the season goes along. We'll review things we see on film, all that stuff. But if you see something that basically resembles that, I think you're in a place where you definitely look at holding him and seeing what happens going forward. So What do you think? Will it continue to be enough? Since we both answered yes, does it continue to be enough as we go forward with Billy?
Well, I believe that's the $25 million question, right?
Yep. Yep.
Actually, for reference, so after 2024, Billy's buyout would be about 25.6 mil, which is 85% of the total 30.2 mil. The 85% is what was agreed upon on a buyout. So in 24, it's 25.6 mil. In 25, it's 19.3 mil. In 26, it's 13 mil. And in 27, the last year, 6.5 million.
Okay.
Lot o money o, right? It's almost $63 million. In other words, when you look at the recruiting piece, can recruiting continue to be strong? Yes. Can he continue to be a great salesman and connect and attract and bring him in? Yes. No different than a great employer having great benefits, right? To be able to attract, recruit, retain, and reward those employees. Can he evolve? I love how he says everything is constantly being evaluated in their system. Great, fine, but at the end of the day, we can also have paralysis by analysis. Okay, so I get the long-term thing. I agree with the long-term thing. I love the fact that he's playing chess, not checkers. But at the same time, sometimes your queen needs to be mobile to pounce across the board. And so with some of those things, the one thing that I think he has lacked is that killer instinct or that definitive nature. And that's the other thing too, when you look at it from an offensive standpoint, if he can relinquish play calling duties or find someone to bounce those ideas off of and take it and run with it. He only has one of the greatest offensive minds, two doors down from him, Steve Spurrier, right? So that is what it is. But if you can relinquish some of that and focus on being the top-notch CEO that we think he can be, with all the other pieces foundationally that are now in place after 2 years, 2 months, and 15 days, is that enough? Will it continue? Is sustainability possible? Yes. Will it continue? I'll be honest with you, that's up to him. It really is, because after all the work and the effort and the long hours and sleepless nights and being on the road to what he's built to this point so far, I get it. It doesn't pass the eye test, Gator Nation. I get the win-loss record. It's not where we want to be. But at the same time, if all that was worth putting us in position to compete the top of the SEC in a couple years and then on the national stage in a few years, then sure, it was worth it, because now all those pieces that have been used foundationally to build that, now you don't have to worry about rebuilding year in, year out. The system is in place. The culture is in place. The process is in place. Everything is in place. Now you just plug and play. You have a beautifully run machine. You oil it. You make sure the cogs are in good shape. Recruiting, transfer portal. If you lose a coach because that coach is top tier talent, you become a Saban at the end of that point. You really do. Saban had a system. Saban had everything in place. And no matter if it was Bill O'Brien, if it was Lane Kiffin, if it was Steve Sarkisian calling the offense, you plug, you play, you move on. Oh, and by the way, when you look at his quarterbacks from McElroy to Hurts and all in between, never really had highly ranked quarterbacks if you look at his system.
Not until Bryce Young.
Correct. And running backs, well, that's a different story. We know the running back culture that came out of Alabama. But outside of that, if that's what Napier is building, and he's a ripe old, 41, 2, 3 years old, whatever.
Yep.
It looks good. It looks good. It looks promising. Will it continue to be enough? It can be, but that's going to be just on him.
Yep. That's it. I totally agree. It's possible, but we have to continue to see the development. But if we do, then I'm excited about what it could bring, and I think we're pretty much aligned on that. So, all right, last question here: if we have a less than stellar season in the fall of 24, can the rebuild continue in the right direction? So I'll let you answer that first, and then I have a follow-up question for you in regards to that. So first, let's answer that, and then we'll delve into the follow-up.
Okay, so less than stellar season. I'll just say it this way: the 24 schedule gives me nightmares. Right, the only team, seriously, the only team in college football that is tasked with facing 11 power conference teams.
How about this little aside for you? I heard this morning the way too early top 25 for I think it was ESPN that put it out for next
Yeah.
season. We are playing 9 ranked teams as of right now.
Yes. Yes, and 5 consecutive games against top 25 opponents
Yep.
that start with Georgia and end with Florida State. Holy smokes, right? And then on top of that, you throw in a trip to Texas. And then, the only good thing about LSU is that we have them back in the swamp, our swamp, not that other bayou crap. Um, so if we have less than a stellar season, if we go another 6-6, if it's a 7-5, I'll tell you what has to be different: the eye test. I don't want to hear players talking about, yeah, you know what, 7 games into the season. Tell me which game I'm referencing. Yeah, everyone looked locked in and focused for the first time. What? No.
Yeah.
Everyone's locked in and focused now.
Yeah, good call out.
Now.
Good call out on that.
You know, you're locked in, you're focused now. The eye test has to be better. The grit has to be better. The trenches has to be better. The scheme has to be better. The timing has to be better. The effort has to be greater. If all those 5, 6 things combined and we have less than a stellar season, there's still momentum there because there's great things to pull upon because the team didn't quit. We didn't have the behavioral issues. We didn't have some of the other things that have plagued us these past couple of years, especially last year, where you look at 2 games specifically and going 5-7 versus 7-5. So that's my take on it.
I like it. I like it. So I broke this down in terms of record in regards to this. So
Yeah.
I said depends on how less than stellar it is. So I think 6
Right.
and 6. I think 6 and 6 from a record perspective with this schedule. And depending on how that 6 and 6 looks, like you just said, right? Just how you were talking about it. I think the answer is yes, depending on how it looks. Right. So if you have a 6 and 6 where you have a lot of close games, right, and you just didn't quite pull them out, and not because you gave up 4th and 19s, and not because you missed a field goal with a procedural penalty before it, and not because, stuff like this happened, right? Not because of stuff like that, not because of games you lost that you should have won. Not talking about that. Talking about tight games that you were in, that you had a chance to win, and it just didn't go your way, not because you messed it up and gave the game up. That's not the same thing, right? But because you were close and you were right there and you just couldn't quite get it over the line again against quality opponents, then I think the answer can still be yes. But another losing season is going to be really tough to swallow here for the fan base, for myself, and I think most importantly for recruits.
Yep.
We just landed a recruit over the weekend, real solid. Highest recruit, I heard again this morning, highest recruit on the offensive line from an overall ranking standpoint in a decade. That's crazy, by the way. That is wild. Peyton Joseph, 106th overall, 4-star.
Great kid.
Yeah, really like him. Hope he sticks. Really think that would be a solid addition. But highest overall offensive line recruit in overall ranking in a decade. Wow, that's shocking. But
Oh,
regardless,
yeah.
he made a comment. He made a comment that he said, I think Florida is really headed in the right direction, like really headed up as a program. Well,
Yes.
what does a recruit think if he's in that mindset, believing that, and then we go 5-7 again? Does he still think we're headed up as a program? Because I wouldn't if I was a recruit. Now, I'm not saying that he particularly defects if we do that or anything else, and goes elsewhere. Might, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know that that happens, but like comments like that make me think about these things, right? And especially with what happened with this last class and some of the guys that we're mentioning that the record at the end of the season did affect their decision, which for the record, I think is a little silly, especially in the second year. I didn't understand some of that mentality. If you're coming to be a part of a rebuild, why are you expecting the team to be better if you're coming to be a part of a rebuild? That to me, that doesn't translate. But to the point of Mr. Joseph, in regards to this, currently, I can actually see it, because you should be getting better in the third year. You should be. And a lack of improvement in overall, despite this schedule, despite this very hard schedule, there should be some improvement, even if it is only one game as far as wins and losses go.
Yeah.
There should be something. And again, it should be more than just the one game improvement. The rest of those games should look better. You shouldn't have double-digit losses, or I mean, maybe there's a double-digit loss in there because we play Texas away and Georgia, those are tough games. Maybe there's a double-digit loss in there, but it's, 10 points, 11 points, right? It's closer. It's not 17 or 20 or, blowout losses, right? You're not getting trucked, as you say, right? Like it's a closer, more competitively played schedule throughout. And again, there's other things besides just the games, the record, and how many points are scored. There's also the other things that are more subtle that we will talk about, right? How the team looks, how they play, how they perform positionally and overall as a unit on offense and defense, which of course we will examine as we talked about. But those are the kind of things that I think you have to see next year for this to really continue to go in the right direction. So, as I said, follow-up question here. Considering that, how much weight do we put on roster talent, coaching, and culture to drive a winning program? And there's a reason we're asking this, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about percentages for this here. I'll give you mine first. For me, I put this at 40% roster talent, and then here I got a little weird, 32% coaching and 28% culture. I almost went 30 and 30, but I couldn't quite weight those equally. I really do think culture is very, very important in the grand scheme of things, but I couldn't quite put it as equal to coaching. I do think coaching is slightly more important than the culture, but that's why I did 32-28. So I got 40 on roster, 32 on coaching, 28 on culture. Where do you stand on this from like a percentage pie breakdown?
Yeah, this took me a while, and I went back and forth, but I'll keep it real high level. Roster 30, coaching 40, culture 30.
Interesting. Okay, so you have roster below. So I've got roster up there, obviously. I don't think you can win without talent. So it's interesting that we diverge a little here. So this will go to my follow-up point. So based on these weightings, and this is kind of the ultimate question here, how much do we attribute the lack of success that we have had so far with Billy as far as on the field results go? How much of that do we put on Billy, and how much goes to what he inherited? So to that end, I'll throw a couple things at you. The talent composite for Napier's 2 seasons, and this only comes from 247, On3 doesn't do this. The talent composite for his 2 seasons, according to 247, is actually better than I thought it would be, for the record. I actually thought it would be lower than this, but it was 14th and 15th nationally for the 2 seasons he's been here so far. And it was actually worse last year than it was the season before, which is also interesting because I wouldn't have known that. The last time it was that low, you actually have to go back to or to find one lower, I guess I should say. You have to go back to 2017. So before Dan Mullen was here.
Huh.
That was Mullen's first season, but right? Yeah, that was Mullen's first season, but it was before he had like his first recruiting class or anything else. So despite Mullen's recruiting woes and everything else, right, which we know about, the talent that he actually had coming in his first year was lower, but then it got better and better and better, not because of his, well, it didn't get better and better and better. It kind of varied along the way, but it went up and down a few times. But the overall composite of what the team was made up of was better under his tenure significantly, but then dropped off significantly Napier's first year. And this is what we've talked about, because it was Mullen's recruits. It was fully Mullen's recruits, right, in the 4th year. that Napier inherited. And that team fell way back off because guess what it was the year before in 2021? 7th.
Yep.
Huge drop. Now, granted, it's still really high overall and really higher than I thought it would be. Again, I'm surprised when I saw this. However, that's still a significant drop in the talent and overall. And the dip, when you look at like the star rankings and what the players were and how the team was made up and everything else, when you look at this, it's a significant drop off from the top tier teams, right? The Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States of the world. Very significant drop off. When you combine that, however, with the culture issues that we've already talked about, right? The significant culture problems, in my opinion, again, that were there. And you had a lot working against Billy when he got here. So again, this is something that I think got talked about a lot when he first got here. And then after like, I don't know, halfway into his first season, maybe even the end of his first season, it stopped getting talked about. It was like, okay, it's all on Billy now. And it's like, no. You don't just turn that stuff around. You don't erase, a huge talent deficiency and maybe not huge, but a talent deficiency and a huge culture problem for sure. You don't just erase those things in a year. They don't just go away in 1 year. No,
Right.
it takes time to build both of those things back up. Clearly, now the 2024 rankings aren't out yet as far as the composites go, but I would almost guarantee you that it's going to rise. Now, I'm not saying it's going to get back up into the top 10. It may not, but I almost guarantee you it's better. I would be shocked if it's not because of the recruiting that he's been doing over the past couple of years. So he's building the talent better. We know the culture is better. That is unquestionable. So there are things that I think are definitely improving. Again, they are systematically, chess not checkers, improving over time as we look at this. And for me, again, roster talent being the most important, there was a drop there. It wasn't as significant as I thought, in fairness. However, there was a drop there that he's been trying to overcome. And we knew this. We talked about this, right? The talent gap between the top tier teams and us was significant. Some of the other teams, not as much, again, as I would have thought, but it was still there. However, none of this excuses the lack of on-field coaching results, right? Because again, I weighted that 32%, and then that has not been there. That has not been where it should have been, and that absolutely has to get better, as we've already mentioned. But I do see a path for that to get better as he continues to build the team, build the organization, being the process guy that he is. Again, as we talked about, I think that will come as time continues. So don't look for a breakout year next year because it's not coming. There is no breakout year coming next year. For those that don't know, DraftKings yet again set us with a 5.5 over under. Same thing as last year. Now, it should be noted with a much harder schedule, even though last year's schedule was hard also, but this one is much harder. 5.5 is an improvement in the ranking. That means they see the team as better, even though the win-loss is still the same. So that should be noted. However, don't look for a breakout year. It's not coming. It just isn't. Especially with this schedule. However, we should see improvement. And if we do, which does include at least a somewhat better results in win-loss, then in my opinion, there's a definitive case that Napier should be retained. However, if there's not, then we really have to question whether or not he should. So again, the ultimate answer, I alluded to it at the very beginning, is I don't know. That's where I'm at. I don't know. And that's kind of a weird answer to give right now, but at the end of the day, there's still more time that needs to pass before I'll know. But at the end of this season, I should know whether or not I think we should keep him for another year at least, or whether or not I think it's probably time that we, start to coach on. And I hate saying that because I like a lot of things about Billy, but ultimately there's got to be some improvement this year for me to think that we should continue with him. So I said a lot there. I probably maybe said too much there, but going back with your breakdown, talk to me about, based on your weighting, what you think the lack of success that we have had, how much of that should we put on Billy based on your weighting of 30, 40, 30?
Yeah, so it's really tough because when you look at having a former offensive coordinator who was part of the glory days from 2005 to 2009, 10, and what he did, you'd have thought all those things translated when he was hired in 2017. It's a shame. The only thing that really translated on the hiring was off the field issues. Um, and
Nice. That's good. That's
well,
good.
no, but I say that to say we understand some of the backgrounds of these kids. I get it, no doubt, but at the same time, that's why, and I'm probably going to chastise for this, but that's why kids need structure and need discipline. Doesn't matter if they're 3 years old, 10 years old, 18 years old, and they're 6'4", 280 pounds. Doesn't matter. That's going to be important. But guess what? Right now, the biggest issue that we have, well, not the issue, the biggest thing now, we have this unraveling of the fact of, guess what? Hey, Billy, it's been 2 years, going year 3. It's your show. It's your players. It's your staff. It's your team. The biggest out he has is the schedule. And you know what? That is really neat. That's a really good point. DraftKings having us at 5.5, because a 5.5 in fall of 24 is vastly different from a 5.5 in fall of 23. Vastly different.
It is at least one game better.
At least,
maybe even a game and a half potentially, but certainly one game better.
100%. So on that basis, if we can take that and shore up some of the other procedural issues, if we can average 7 points a game better on the overall season, which will take us from 28 to 35.
Big call out there. I don't know if we can do that, but all right. I like where your head's at, but all right.
I'm just saying definitively 7 more points a game than last season takes us from 28 to 35. When you look at, you look at the offensive numbers right now. And if we go from 409 yards a game to 400 and say 50 or 60, if we take our rushing yards per game from $149 to 180, if we take some of those explosive plays, 20 plus yards, from 60 to 70, and yes, the competition's terrible, it's worse, but guess what? And we finish 7-5, absolute pandemonium. And people have to feel good about that season, because if we're close in games, if we're competitive, like you said, no blowouts, nothing past 10, 11 points, that's going to yield very good things to 25 and 26. Because the other thing that I'd heard, and I want to say, I don't want to quote this, but DJ Lagway was one of our earliest commits, right? Dating back to December of 22. It seems like forever ago.
23, but yes. No, you're right. 22. You're right. I apologize. 22. You're right.
We got to go back to exactly. So
God,
when you look
it
at
feels
that,
like forever ago. You're right.
It does. It does. And so I look at that, and I look at some of the new commits that we have here for 25, and I see what they saw Lagway do, and Lagway's been in their air and this and that and the other. Okay, great. The thing that I fear is Billy doesn't have that great. Let's say it is 6 and 6. Let's say it is 75. The optics, the eye test. Let's say the eye test isn't passed. B. I fear that if Billy is sent packing, DJ's gone.
Yeah, that is a concern. That is a concern. I would agree with you. That concern is real.
So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and if that happens, Gator Nation, if those things come to fruition, right? Let's say we go 6 and 6. Hypothetically, we go 6 and 6. Billy goes. Lagway decides there are greener pastures elsewhere because he wanted to play for Napier, and he decides to go elsewhere, wherever that may be. And I wouldn't speculate. Dark times are ahead.
It's
You
a
thought it
grimsly
was you
situation.
you thought it was bad before. You thought it was bad before. So this is the thing I will say. You thought it was bad before. Just you wait.
Oh yeah.
Because I would challenge you that anybody coming into that situation with no quarterback on the roster, right, that is of any consequence, assuming that we don't have anybody coming in 25. I know we have some prospects on the list for 25, and assuming they even signed,
Right.
because they could potentially go as well. But let's say they did, and you'd have to potentially start the freshman or the transfer from Colorado State. Those are
Yeah.
your options. Big yikes.
I don't even want to think about it.
Big, yeah, I don't either. Big
I know I
yikes.
said it. I
I
just don't
mean,
want to think about
put 2 and 10 on the table, ladies and gentlemen, because that's what's in the future. Put 3 and 9 on the table. These are the potential records for 2025. If that scenario that you just said plays out, I don't give a damn who the coach is. How about that? Yikes. And the portal attrition would be massive.
So all that work, all that ramp up, all that foundational building gone, and then I
Correct.
utter okay. Right now, with everything else, if all this pans out at $7.2 million a year, he's a steal. And that sounds really
Yeah.
odd to say, by the way. That sounds really odd. Who
No,
else
it
do
does,
we
but
get
you're
in
right.
here? Yeah,
But
who
you're
else do
right.
we get in here to run the ship
So
at no less than 8 or 9, maybe 10 mil a year? Who's going to come in to do that? Because I'm
this is
sorry, can't.
yeah, and this is a really good point that you're getting at. So I don't care whoever's listening to this and wherever you might be, as we like to say, right? This is a really, really important point. No matter how you feel about Napier, whether you love him, whether you hate him, you need to be rooting for him next season.
Yeah,
You really do. You need to be rooting for him to take this team to a minimum, in my opinion, of 7-5, hopefully 8-4, which frankly is going to be really hard, but a minimum of 7-5, which is a damn good season, as we've already discussed. And you need to be rooting for that if you're a fan of the Florida Gators. And the reason you need to be rooting for that is next year is not the year that you can afford to lose him. You need to have Lagway come in here and have a year as a starter first, because if he gets that, even if he gets that, then maybe you can afford to lose Napier, and then maybe he stays because he's had a
yes,
year at the helm. Right? He has a better chance of staying in that scenario, in my opinion, like a significantly better chance of staying, in my opinion, at that point in time than he does if he hasn't had that yet. I think he is much more liable to transfer, to your point. And if that happens, we are in deep, deep trouble as a program. The future
extremely.
is, I mean, it is the darkest of timelines coming for the next year, 2, maybe even 3, depending on who we hire and where we go. It would be not good at all. It would be a rough time to be a Florida football fan, as rough as we have seen for significant time consecutively in a long time. So, in my opinion, you need to be a Napier fan next year, and root for him to do as well as humanly possible up against this juggernaut of a schedule,
Mhm.
so that we do not run into that potential scenario, because I think retaining him is the best case scenario. And for the record, I'm not rooting for it if it's not the smart move, but we need to hope that it is the smart move, because it needs to happen for the future of this program, because
Yep.
without it, we're really, I mean, we're in the potential for that to happen. What you just said is real, and honestly, it's maybe even probable. It's scary. It is a scary scenario if he leaves after next year, or if he is dismissed, he wouldn't leave. But if he is dismissed after next year, the potential ramifications of that are frightening. They are frightening. And I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see what that fallout looks like. You thought the fallout after Mullen was bad. I think this would potentially be significantly worse. It's my opinion. I could be wrong, been wrong before, but I don't think I am, because I think, to your point, Lagway being the key position there probably leaves. or at least is likely to leave. And that would just be detrimental. So anyway, we won't belabor that anymore. I don't want to get caught up in the negative any more than we already did. But that is really a significant thing to look at. So hopefully, having said all of that, and hopefully having gone through all of that, we do see this improvement that we want to see next year. And we do, get to a place at the end of 24 where Napier does look like still the, potential future of this program. But again, I won't call for it if we don't, I don't think either one of us will, if we don't think that's the right way to go, regardless of the fallout, because ultimately we don't want to stay mediocre. Even if it does mean keeping Lagway and potentially being, moderately successful or even, better than we have been in recent years, it still means that there's a ceiling on it because of the limitations that Napier has, right? And that's what we would have a problem with. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to get to a better level, even if it does mean going through years of darkness, right? That's ultimately the goal that you want to get to. And I think that the only way you get there is by having the right person in place. And that's what we're really trying to say here. Could Napier be that person? Possibly. Could he not be? Possibly. My answer again is I don't know. I haven't really heard you say a definitive on that. What do you think? Do you feel like you have enough data yet to evaluate that, or do you still need another year like I do?
In my heart of hearts, Napier's it.
Wow. Okay.
I just feel
those orange are those orange and blue goggles coming out?
they are, man. They are. But outside of that, everything else we've talked about organizationally, everything else we've talked about in the system, in the culture, what's being built, the attitude on field, just everything in general. It
Yeah,
I cannot imagine.
I get why you're there.
Yeah, I just can't imagine the stress involved. He's got a family, he's got 2, 3 kids. I cannot imagine the stress involved. Not just an NFL football coach, a college football coach, a Power 5 conference that is the #1 public institution in the nation. I mean, it's just crippling stress. How he deals with it, I have no idea. I was a faithful guy, so that I'm sure that has a lot to play in with it. But all that building, all that work, all that opportunity, the getting there and then step back and 2 steps forward and 5 steps back and 1 step forward and 6 steps back. You can't tell me that he's not being built and this program is not being built for something greater. I won't accept it.
No, I hear you. And I know with how much you value the culture piece and what Gator made, means to you, if you will, and how much kind of pride you take in the pride of the sunshine piece, right?
Yeah.
I know how much that means to you and how much value you put in that segment of what we talk about and what he's doing and everything else. It makes sense to me why you think he's the guy, because it's clear to me that is of extreme importance to him, right? We talk about it a ton, but it shouldn't be undervalued. And I agree with that. I think that goes a long way. I wish that was more important, really, in the grand scheme of things, honestly, because I think it really does matter. For what it's worth, I wish there was more value placed on that societally. For not to get into a philosophical debate here, but I wish there was, because I think it's really important too. So I get why you think he's the guy, because of the value and importance he places on that stuff. So it makes sense to me now that I think about it that you're already sold.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. I do. For me, again, I want some more data is really what it comes down to. I want another year of data. And once I have that, then I think I can make a more accurate assessment, especially knowing some of the things that I know that have transpired this offseason. So I want to see where that leads us and where that takes us and where we go from here. But to that end, I'm interested to see where that goes, and I'm excited to see how it plays out next season. I do have some things that I'm really looking forward to see next season, despite the fact that this is not going to be like some banner year for us. I'm really interested to see some stuff from this team next year. I'm really interested to see some things play out. And we'll obviously talk more about that. I won't get into it now, but
yeah,
really some fun things to watch next year. Some young talent, some developing talent, some young coaches, some developed coaches, right? A lot of different things that are going to be cool and fun to see play out on the field. So hopefully we don't have to get too caught up in some of the stuff that we got a little caught up in this season because of some stuff that happened. Hopefully that gets cleaned up and we can just focus on more of the fun stuff. That would be my hope, but we'll see what happens, right? So to that end, we'll wrap this thing up. We will, as we have alluded to more than once, or I have alluded to at least more than once, have a pod in 2 weeks. It will be 2 weeks from today, which is March 5th, I believe. So we will be dropping a very interesting pod on NIL. We have some really cool information from a source close to the program. We'll leave it at that. So some really interesting stuff that we will be coming to you with in regards to that information and some talk tracks around that. So we're really, really excited to bring that to you. We were debating on whether or not we could even do a pod on this because of the lack of information that we could really get on NIL. And then Randy came through with a super cool source for this. He was able to kind of pull that out. So kudos to Randy on that one. Can't cite the source, but we'll just say that it's a definitely a reliable one, and we'll leave it at that. Maybe talk a little more about it when we do the pod, but very, very interesting information that I think we're going to be able to share with you in regards to the NIL situation for Florida specifically, and then maybe overall a little bit as it relates to college football and kind of where things are. We've talked about it to an extent already as it relates to recruiting, but I think we'll be able to kind of do an overall picture of this, at least where it is right now. Obviously, this is kind of an ever-changing landscape currently, so certainly subject to change in a lot of areas. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of this lawsuit with Tennessee and Virginia. But for
Right.
now, we have some really interesting insight that I'm personally, I shouldn't say personally, we're both really excited to share with everyone. And I think it'll be really cool to bring you some of this. And I think it'll be very insightful as it relates to some of the conversations that we were already having about recruiting. We had a lot of suspicions around this. So I think it'll be really cool to be able to talk to it a little more definitively and not just with our suspicions, right? So
Exactly.
really looking forward to that. Anything you want to talk to around that?
No, it's just eye-opening,
Yeah.
insightful, and a lot of questions answered, which
Yeah.
unfortunately brought up more questions. But at the
Yeah.
same time, the perspective was good just to understand kind of what's going on, why certain moves are being made. And yeah, we look forward to bringing you that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and why certain moves aren't being made.
Yeah, fair.
So, yeah, no, really, really interesting stuff. As Randy said, really looking forward to bringing it to you. I hope you'll all take the time to give us a listen on that. I think it will be very interesting to be able to get into that discussion. But that will come your way in a couple of weeks here. As I said, on the 5th is what we're projecting for that. It should be on the 5th. But until then, we will say our farewells for this evening. So, with that, wherever you are and whenever you may be listening, thanks for taking the time. And we'll see you around, Gator Nation.